And let us pause for a moment to pay tribute to our brother, Rahimahullah Sheikh Anwar Al-Awlaki. I don't think there's need to say more than one statement about Anwar Al-Awlaki. Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, "My ummah is like the rain. My ummah is like the rain. I do not know which shower is better, the first or the last." Anwar Al-Awlaki belongs to the last shower. That is his status. May Allah grant him Jannah. So these are the 10 major signs of the last day. And now that army is swallowed by the earth. Damascus has one more importance, and that is that Dajjal is also going to be in Damascus. When Nabi Isa alayhi salam comes down, Imam al-Mahdi is in the masjid. The salat takes place. After the salat is over, Imam al-Mahdi, the Nabi Isa alayhi salam will say, "Open the gates," because the masjid is barricaded. And Dajjal will be outside. And when Dajjal sees Nabi Isa alayhi salam, his fright will be such that he'll melt the way salt melts in water. And so we do not treat Damascus so easily. We do not analyze the uprisings and the insurrection in Damascus, in Syria, from a limited perspective. Rather, we're looking at it in a long-term perspective. What's going to happen between now and that moment when Nabi Isa alayhi salam returns? We know that Israel will have to wage a big wars. Maybe we postpone our international Islamic retreat because we're expecting those wars to commence soon, maybe within the next 1 year. But before I end, I want to direct your attention to the fact that Britain did not give way to the United States as a second ruling state before Britain was placed in a situation where she was facing defeat. Germany in the First World War used a new weapon of war never used before. Germany used the submarine. And German submarines had marooned Britain. And Britain had enough food to survive for probably another 2 weeks. Britain was going to lose the war had the United States not intervened. I say this to you so that you would think. The Zionists then went to the United States. Well, first of all, they went to Britain and said, "Let's make a deal. You're going to lose the war. Let's make a deal." So Britain asked, "What do you want?" "We want Jerusalem. We want the Holy Land." And that's how the Balfour Declaration came out. And then the Zionists went to work and they rode over, what's his name again? They went to the Ford Muluka, Henry Ford, the most popular American at that time, more popular than the president. And he was opposing American intervention in the war. And yet the Zionists succeeded. And they brought the United States into the war. And so I say to you that in order for Israel to replace the United States, a trap has to be set for the United States. And the United States has to suffer a fall a big fall, in consequence of which it will be clear the United States can no longer be considered the ruling state in the world. Part of that trap, of course, is the deliberate, pre-planned demolition of the US dollar. The deliberate, pre-planned, incremental demolition of the US economy. They're almost at the end of the road now. But I want to ask the question that is there a military trap as well? Maybe that's why Russia and China did not veto the first resolution on Libya. That there's a trap being set for the United States. And as they move in, they'll find themselves in a military situation where they're going to be facing embarrassing defeat because they're overextending themselves, overreaching. And then to save the United States, Israel will have to intervene. In the same way that to save Britain, the United States had to intervene. I leave you with these thoughts. What we've done tonight is to touch the subject of Syria from our long-term perspective. Iran is going to suffer serious consequences if there's regime change in Syria. Iran will be isolated. The attack on Iran is pre-planned. I don't think it's because they want to simply destroy the nuclear plants in Iran. I think they have a more important perspective, that they want regime change in Iran. They want a virulently Shia regime in Iran that will become more amenable to building a relationship with Israel. The attack on Pakistan is coming. And when the attack on Pakistan takes place, it will be for the purpose of destroying Pakistan's nuclear plants and dismantling Pakistan's nuclear weapons. Israel cannot launch a big wars when Muslims have a weapon that they can use effectively against Israel. It follows, therefore, that perhaps the first attack will be Pakistan. Given the support that the Pakistan government and the Pakistan armed forces, I don't know why Pakistanis should be annoyed with me for this. This is facts. The Pakistan armed forces have betrayed Allah and His messenger monstrously. I'm talking not about the soldiers who love Islam. I'm talking about those who control strategic decision making. Don't come to me and tell me that all the soldiers in the Pakistan armed forces love Islam. I know that. I know that the Pakistani people love Islam. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those who control decision making in the armed forces and in the government. They are the ones who betrayed Allah and His messenger. They are the ones who for the last 10 years shamelessly have allowed NATO transit to take all the oil supplies and all the military supplies from the port in Karachi, all through Pakistan to Afghanistan, to support the killing of our Muslim brothers and sisters and children in Afghanistan, thanks to the Pakistan armed forces and Pakistan government. And you're going to be annoyed with me for condemning that? Yes, there are many people in Pakistan and the armed forces who love Islam and who detest what has happened, but they're not in control. What we have done tonight, and time is now up, is to look at this perspective from look at this subject from the perspective of Islamic eschatology. And when you do that, you'll see a pattern emerging. A pattern which is showing you Israel inching, moving forward little by little towards her eventual objective of launching her big wars, and then blaming Islam. Islam is now rising up, the Arab uprisings. Islam is emerging in Egypt because the election's coming. And the Islam that is rising up in the world today poses a threat to Israel. And we have to do something to save Israel and to save the world from Islam. And that's why we have to launch these big wars. These events are coming. And it is time for the ulama to return to the Quran. It is time for the ulama to return to the Quran and to return to Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam and return to ilmu akhirul zaman, so that they can understand the reality of the world today and they can explain it to the ummah of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين. May we have the question and answer now? The question is the demolition of the US dollar connected with some subject of 3 days. I know nothing about 3 days. No. What I do know is that Barack Obama is not there by chance. They put him there. They put a black man in the White House. And they put the black man in the White House to take blame. To be the guinea pig. To take the blame. Because they know what's coming. I guess they're probably waiting for, the US dollar is already finished. It's in ICU. They're keeping it alive. They're waiting for a war, probably. And then they blame the war for it. And the US dollar will then collapse. Wall Street will witness its collapse. And then they will demonetize the US dollar, meaning it's no longer recognized as legal tender. And because so many countries hold stacks of US dollars, you can't buy oil in the world without US dollars. That's unfair, really. So all those US dollars that you're holding will suddenly collapse. China is going to lose most of all. Saudi Arabia is going to be losing a lot. And then they will replace the US dollar with another currency which will have a fraction of the cost. So on every $1 that you had, you're probably going to get 5 cents. White America is going to suffer massively. Black America is not rich. And when white America suffers this massive blow, the United States has a very curious law. In the United States, you're allowed to buy guns. Oh yeah? You can buy as many guns as you want, it's the law. So white America has lots of guns. So when the US dollar collapses, you're going to have fireworks in the United States. Fireworks, riots, killing, and they're preparing for it. But I don't know about the 3 days. Any more questions?
Is this riot in the Arab world? I'm actually Moroccan, which also had noticed some of the riots. And I wanted to ask you whether these riots in Morocco, Tunisia, Yemen, Bahrain, all those countries actually, even in Jordan these days, are pre-planned Zionist tactic, or is it, I mean, like, those riots will have a good result on the Islam and the Muslim nation, or will have bad results?
Okay. There is an analogy. When the summer comes and there is no rain, then the land becomes parched and the grass becomes dry and brittle. And then you know that only one match is sufficient to start off a huge wildfire with thousands and thousands of acres burning and many, many houses being destroyed. Only one little spot.